Today, we are diving into one of the most explosive, chaotic, and world-shaping events in all of history, the French Revolution. This was a time of huge, radical ideas and, yeah, some pretty bloody upheaval. It was a turning point that, believe me, still echoes in our world today. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's a tense morning in Paris. The year is 1789. The air is just thick with rumors and with fear. The king, he's ordered troops into the city, and people are whispering that he's about to order his army to fire on them. The whole city was basically a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. And then, the spark came. Thousands of Parisians, we're talking men and women, formed their own militia. They were desperate for weapons, so they set their sights on the Bastille, this old medieval fortress that was being used as a prison. And it was a hated symbol, you know. It represented the king's absolute tyrannical power. After a really bloody fight, the crowd takes the fortress, they free the prisoners, and in the days that followed, they start tearing the building down, brick by brick. This wasn't just a riot, this was a statement.
But you have to ask, how did things get to this point? I mean, why would ordinary people risk their lives to tear down a prison? Well, to understand that, we need to take a step back and look at the kind of society that created this moment of rebellion.
To get that answer, we've got to look at what France was like before 1789. It was a system known today as the Old Regime. And honestly, it was a kingdom just teetering on the brink of total collapse, strained by three huge fundamental problems that were all about to boil over at the same time. So, this slide really lays out the core of the problem, the fundamental unfairness of French society. It was split into three groups, or estates. The first estate was the clergy. The second was the nobility. Together, they were a tiny, tiny fraction of the population, but get this, they owned about 60% of the land and crucially paid almost no taxes. And the third estate? Well, that was literally everyone else. We're talking 90% of the people. From peasants to lawyers to merchants, they carried almost the entire tax burden that kept the country running.
You know, there was this popular saying at the time that just nails it. It perfectly captures how the Third Estate felt. They saw the nobility as these predators, just living off their labor while contributing absolutely nothing. It was an exploitative system that had been around for centuries, and people were, well, they were reaching their breaking point.
On top of that social crisis, you had a financial one, a big one. When King Louis XVI came to the throne, he basically inherited an empty treasury. Years of long wars, including helping out the American colonies in their revolution, and the insane spending of the court at Versailles had run up massive debts. I mean, just look at this chart. The government was spending a huge chunk of its budget just paying the interest on its loans. The only solution they could see was to raise taxes. On who? You guessed it, the Third Estate, of course. And this brings us to the most immediate life-or-death problem, an empty stomach. A series of bad harvests made the price of bread, the main food for most French people, just skyrocket. So think about it. The government is broke, society is totally unequal, and now most people can't even afford to eat. This combination was the absolute definition of a powder keg.
So, you've got the powder keg all set up. Now, all you need is the spark. And that spark came in the form of powerful new ideas that gave people a whole new way to imagine their world.
You had these thinkers from the Enlightenment, guys like Locke and Rousseau, and they were challenging the very foundation of the old regime. They argued that government should be based on a social contract, an agreement between the people and their representatives, not on the divine right of some king. They were talking about a society built on freedom, equal laws, and what you could do, not who your parents were. And these ideas, they spread like wildfire through coffeehouses and pamphlets, giving a voice to everyone's frustrations.
This quote from George Danton, who would become a major revolutionary leader, just captures the frustration of the middle class perfectly. You had all these educated men from the Third Estate who saw that their talent meant nothing compared to the accident of being born a noble. The system was holding them back, and they knew it.
And this timeline shows you just how fast things went from bad to worse for the king. In May of 1789, he calls a big meeting to approve new taxes. By June, the Third Estate has just walked out, declared themselves a national assembly, and taken the famous tennis court oath, vowing to write a constitution. In July, the Bastille falls. And then, in one incredible night on August 4th, the assembly abolishes the entire feudal system. I mean, think about that. Centuries of privilege and tradition just wiped away in a matter of hours.
The start of the revolution was full of this incredible idealism. But as the revolutionaries tried to build a new world from scratch, their project would end up taking a very, very dark and violent turn.
But first, the vision. The National Assembly issued this incredible document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It established rights like liberty, equality before the law, and freedom of speech as natural and inalienable. It was basically a blueprint for a modern society, and it went on to become one of the most important documents in the history of human rights, period.
The thing is, the king was playing a really dangerous game. He tried to flee the country and got caught secretly conspiring with foreign kings to come in and crush the revolution. For the revolutionaries, this was the ultimate betrayal, and it sealed his fate. In September 1792, the monarchy was completely abolished, and France declared itself a republic. Just a few months later, the man once known as King Louis XVI, now just called Citizen Louis Capet, was executed for treason. After that, there was no going back.
So, with France at war with most of Europe and facing rebellions at home, a radical group called the Jacobins, led by a guy named Maximilien Robespierre, seized control. They kicked off a period that became known as the Reign of Terror. Their thinking was, to save the revolution, they had to unleash this brutal policy of arresting and executing anyone they even suspected of being an enemy of the Republic.
And the symbol of this whole period was the guillotine. It was actually promoted as a humane and efficient method of execution, but it quickly became the instrument of revolutionary terror. Its blade fell on tens of thousands of people, from aristocrats to, well, even former revolutionaries.
What's fascinating here is the fierce debate happening inside the revolution itself. On one side, you have revolutionaries like Camille Desmoulins saying, hey, liberty should be about happiness and justice, not fear. But on the other side, you have Robespierre arguing that terror is a necessary evil, that it's a form of swift, severe, and inflexible justice needed to protect the Republic. In the end, Desmoulins himself would be executed by Robespierre's government.
And we absolutely cannot forget the role of women here. They were on the front lines from the very beginning, famously marching on Versailles to demand bread. They formed their own political clubs, they passionately argued for equal rights. But in a really bitter irony, the revolution, this movement fought in the name of liberty and equality, flat out refused to give them the right to vote or hold office. It was a profound betrayal.
Eventually, the Reign of Terror burned itself out, but from the ashes of all that violence and chaos, powerful new seeds were planted that would grow to change the entire world.
Robespierre himself was eventually sent to the guillotine, and that brought an end to the terror. A more moderate but pretty unstable government called the Directory took over. All this instability created a power vacuum, which was famously filled by a brilliant, ambitious young general, Napoleon Bonaparte. And then, in 1804, he crowns himself emperor. It really seemed like the revolution had come full circle, right? From an absolute king all the way back to an emperor?
But that's not the whole story, not even close. In the end, what really survived the terror and Napoleon wasn't an emperor, it was an idea. The revolution's core ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, those were its most powerful legacy. You couldn't contain them with borders. They spread all across Europe and the globe, inspiring countless other movements for democracy and national independence.
And that leaves us with one last question to think about. The revolution's cry for liberty, equality, and fraternity completely reshaped the modern world. But as we navigate our own complex times, it's worth asking ourselves, what do those powerful words mean to us, right here, right now?